رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum. This presentation that we are making today is about building beautiful minds. Let me share with you a little bit about how it started. A few years back, we started thinking that all the major global flashpoints are in the Islamic countries in the Ummah. So the question that we asked ourselves is what's happening, and number two, what we can do about it. So the first thing we understood is that the Ummah is made up of countries, and countries are made up of families, and families are made up of people. Every person is defined by the quality of his or her own mind. So if you see good people, they will produce good results, and if the mind is good, you'll have good results. But if the mind is not operating at an optimum level, then the results will not be optimum. So we said, what if we focus on building the beautiful minds as Rasulullah did 1400 years ago, and help people develop these minds so that the families can become beautiful. And if we can help the families become beautiful, maybe the community, the masajid, the countries, and the ummah can become beautiful. So with this quest in mind, we started thinking about how can we do it. The first step was basically the purpose. The purpose of this program is basically to emphasize the importance and urgency of building beautiful minds in our schools, colleges, universities, masajid, homes, and workplaces. Now, what is beautiful mind all about? The first thing we understood in developing this concept is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us tremendous resources to succeed. Actually, when a child is born, whether here or back home, whether in a palace or in a poor man's house, every single man, woman, and child has been granted tremendous resources to succeed. The key thing to understand is that it is not the resources we have, but how do we use these resources and what sort of results that we produce, not only for this world, but the hereafter. Now, in order to make this conversion happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every one of us something beautiful and magnificent called a mind. Now, some people use this mind with hikmah. We call these people gardeners. Gardeners are special. Actually, you give them a barren piece of land, they will immediately start thinking about how to convert it into a garden. They will plant trees, plants, flowers, grass, and enable people to enjoy it. Now, what actually the gardeners do is that they use minimum resources to produce tremendous results. These gardeners are responsible for most of the beautiful things that we see in life. On the other hand, some people use their minds without hikmah, without wisdom, and these are the people whom we call parasites or woodcutters. Parasites and woodcutters, they specialize in using massive resources of the community, and they produce negative results. So once we understood this, we really understood that if you look at the ummah, this was the ummah of gardeners, people who were supposed to create beautiful things for other people. But actually it has been taken over by parasites and woodcutters. So if you look at every single country which is a flashpoint, you will find that you will see parasites and woodcutters amongst the leadership, amongst the people who are governing it, and also amongst the populace. And for the one or two countries who are doing well in the ummah, you will find that there's a gardener not only in the leadership role, but also there are many gardeners in the population in that country. So we said, what can we do about it? The first thing we wanted to know was how to distinguish a gardener from a woodcutter or a parasite. Now, towards this end, we found that actually you can't look at a person and say whether this person is a gardener or a parasite. The actual difference is in how they think. So we did something called thought mapping. We started mapping out their thought patterns. The first and the most powerful thing that hit us is that the gardener in any situation, whether he or she is with a family, friends, community, masjid, nation, ummah, is always thinking about what can I give back. While a woodcutter or a parasite is always thinking about what can I take. So the second question was, where is it coming from? And there we found something very interesting. These gardeners, they have niyyah or intention of khair, of doing good. And because of that, they give not only just in the 30 days of Ramadan or on a Friday or on a Thursday, but 24/7 they seek opportunity with commitment and responsibility to give and share with others. When we looked at the woodcutters, they were driven by the intention or niya of shar, and they were taking not just once in a while, but with total commitment and responsibility, 24/7, always thinking what they can get more and more and more. So the second question we asked was, where is this woodcutting business coming from in the Ummah? So we looked at the birth and death cycle of a human being. The day a child is born, the child is an unconditional taker. And over a period of time, the child says, oh, this is my bottle, this is my shoes, my clothes, my books, my school, my report card, and then my job, my salary, my house, my spouse. And then, the accumulation keeps on going and going and going. Most of us, we forget this day, which Quran says every person will taste, which is death. And on that day, something very powerful happens. Everything that we have, we are forced to give up unconditionally. So between these two dates, the paradigm of a woodcutter or parasite is that they learn to take as much as they can, to give as little as they can, and the idea is to accumulate profit and wealth, and that is how they define success. Actually, if you look throughout history, this was the paradigm of Pharaoh, Qarun, Haman. The paradigm of Prophet ﷺ and all the Anbiya Karam and the Sahaba was to share and give everything unconditionally. And if you really want to understand this, all you have to do is read this beautiful ayah, Kul inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. A rough translation is, tell them that all my salah, all my ibadah, all my sacrifice, my life and my death is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, we have forgotten this beautiful lesson over a period of time, and we have adopted this paradigm as the principle to live our life with. So the next question we asked was that what do the woodcutters want to take? They actually live their life according to what they need. The three primary needs that drive a woodcutter are hubbe mal, which is love for money, hubbe jah, which is love for significance, to be praised and appreciated by others, and the third one is hubbe power, that they should have enough power to make or break others. A gardener, on the other hand, lives his or her life according to their values. They also need money to live, but this is how they're different. They actually make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us only that rizq, which is halal and tayyib and which has khair and barakah in it. They also want to be praised and loved by others, but instead of asking for it, they give so much significance to others that others appreciate them and care for them. They also want to have power, but their actual power comes from the ability to build a beautiful mind for themselves and then teach it to others. And this is so powerful that over a period of time, they have influenced generations into becoming better human beings. So a gardener, when he or she lives her life or his or her life according to the values, with the intention of khair, giving with commitment and responsibility, they actually build and contribute. On the other hand, a woodcutter, when they live their life according to the needs, with the intention of shar, taking with commitment and responsibility, they demolish and destroy everything. So once we understood this, we said, what can we do? So the greatest challenge was first of all, to transform ourselves from woodcutters into gardeners. And the second challenge was to share it with others in such a way that we can start transforming a critical mass of people in the Ummah so that we can change the destiny of the Ummah in the next 10 years. We wanted a role model, and when we searched for one, the best role model which we find, a person we can all agree upon, was Prophet ﷺ. And this beautiful ayah actually alludes to his role as a gardener, and we have not sent you Muhammad ﷺ, but as a mercy for all the worlds. We also live in an age of science, and we wanted to understand what science has to say about building beautiful minds. Pascal was a great scientist, and he says, nature imitates herself. A grain thrown into good ground brings forth fruit. A principle thrown into good mind brings forth fruit. Everything is created and conducted by the same master. In the original quote, he has written master with a capital M. Actually, he's referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the roots, the branches, the fruits, the principles, and the consequences. So here's my take on this quote, that if you plant the seeds of deen in your mind, then you will reap the fruits of deen, which is peace, prosperity, happiness. But if you plant the seeds of shar and kufr in your mind, then you will reap the consequences which the ummah is reaping these days. So the first step was to define a beautiful mind. A beautiful mind creates value by focusing on possibilities and challenges in a world of limitations and problems. Throughout his life, Rasulullah ﷺ faced tremendous limitations and problems, but he responded to them by focusing on possibilities and challenges, whether it was his trip to Taif, the 3 hijras, or Sulh Hudaybiyah. He was always looking for possibilities and challenges to make a difference. A beautiful mind increases the size of the pie. When a woodcutter is asked by somebody for some favor, he or she will hide their pie and say, well, I don't have anything. But a gardener will not only share his pie, but he will teach others how to increase the size of the pie so that there is enough for everybody. A beautiful mind makes what seems impossible possible and difficult easy. This is very significant, that as the mind becomes better and better, things which are difficult, they become easy for us. Things which are impossible, they become possible. A beautiful mind enables ordinary people to see the big picture, to produce extraordinary results. One of the things which we have often wondered is that the Sahaba Karam, there were actually somewhere between 250 to 500 Sahaba who used to live around Rasulullah ﷺ in Medina. And with beautiful minds, in the next 30 years, they changed the course of history. But right now, there are 1.7 billion Muslims, and we can't even take care of ourselves. So what's going on? The first thing we understood was that the Sahaba Karam, they were able to see the big picture. If anybody asked them, who do you work for? They would say, we work for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, if anybody asked them, what do you do? The response would be very simple. They would say, we have heard the message. We are trying to understand and live it. And our biggest quest is to pass it on. Unfortunately, we have stopped doing that, and we are facing the consequences. So how is a beautiful mind built? Basically, some people are gifted, they have beautiful minds by default. If you're born to Muslim parents, given a Muslim name, live a Muslim life, you have a beautiful mind by default. But other people are even more gifted. They are able to build their own beautiful minds by design. And actually, if you really want to understand this, you look at the life of each and every one of the Sahaba Karam. They gave up their houses, their spouses, their businesses, their tribal affiliations, everything for the cause of Islam. And these people you actually see in the minds of the reverts who accept Islam, and then they design their own beautiful mind accordingly. The greatest people in the world were able to guide others in building beautiful minds by design. These are the Anbiya Karam mentioned in the Quran, excuse me, the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, Taba Tabi'in. The big question that we faced was, can we build beautiful minds by design? If yes, then how in today's world? So in order to answer this question, we developed a strategy. If you actually look at life, it is made up of hardware and software. We borrowed this term for the computers. Hardware is our bodies, our houses, our spouses, our cars, our wealth, our city, our country, our world, sun, moon, stars, the galaxies, the whole universe. Software is our ability to think. So the key question is, we have both, alhamdulillah, what is more important? And 1400 years ago, we understand the answer from the dawah of Rasulullah ﷺ to his companions. He didn't ask them, did he ask them to change their houses and spouses or horses? Or did he ask them to change the way they think? The message of Islam was totally, absolutely about changing software. And once this software was changed, everything in the world started changing. Unfortunately, if you look at our lives today, we have forgotten this message about the purity of the software of deen, and we are focusing more and acquiring more and more hardware. So this is the reason why we are facing the problems that we have. Our strategy is very simple. In order to make a difference, we want to facilitate the building of beautiful minds. Mind is the software of the brain. With most people, the mind develops by default. The development of the mind depends 10% upon the genes and 90% of the environment we live in. I was doing this workshop in Florida, and one of the top neurologists, who happened to be a Pakistani Muslim, he gave me these numbers, and he said that this is how it works out. So if you're born to extremely pious parents, but you're raised in a very corrupt environment, you will be a very pious but corrupt person. So you may be doing your salah, your siyam and qiyam, you give your zakat and your hajj, but in all your dealings, you will not be as honest. You won't have the integrity, the honesty which Islam wants us to have. So, however, and this is the problem we are facing in the Ummah, that the environment has become extremely corrupt, and genetically we are Muslims. So how do we fight this corruption in the environment? Some people are able to build beautiful minds by design, despite their genes and environment. If you really want to understand this, then you read the story of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam in the Quran. And Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, if you look at his life, genetically he came from a family of people who had been enslaved by the family of Pharaoh. And for hundreds of years, genetically, they were trained to be subservient. That was his genes. But on the other hand, he was raised in the most corrupt house in Egypt, the house of Pharaoh. So what we should have seen was, in the person of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, a very weak and corrupt person. Instead, we find this very magnificent prophet, the most mentioned prophet in Quran. So one of the questions I asked my teacher was, why did this happen? And the explanation my teacher gave me was very powerful. He said, Nasser, in any given environment, there is both elements of khair and shar in it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the power to choose. So in case of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, as a child, he was exposed to many things in the house of Pharaoh, but he picked up the goodness of Bibi Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. And as he grew up, Pharaoh started taking him to the court, and there he found the arrogance of Pharaoh and the leadership. And he refuted the arrogance and chose leadership for himself. And then when Hazrat Musa alayhi salam has to run away to Madian, and there he meets his future father-in-law, who says that for at next 8 to 10 years of service, he will give the hand of one of his daughters in marriage. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam learns wisdom from his father-in-law. And now when you see Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, you see this goodness, you see leadership, and you see wisdom, and that's him. So the next question I asked my teacher was that he was a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was guiding him directly with divine interventions. But what about people like myself? My teacher said, well, we are so lucky that in every house of every Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us two gifts to guide us, the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah. And if we hold them with both hands, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that He'll protect us not only in this life, but hereafter. Okay, so we have talked about a beautiful mind. The next question is, what is a beautiful mind? The biggest thing about a beautiful mind is it's discerning. It has this unique ability to understand what is right and what is wrong. And but what's so big about it? Every man, woman, and child in Islam knows what's right and wrong. The big thing is that even after knowing what's right and wrong, most of us, we are very comfortable in walking the path of shaitan. Very few of us can walk the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because it's so lonely, it's so desolate, and so few of our friends are on that path. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very merciful, and He makes this path easy by giving us three passions. The first passion is Hubbullah, which is love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second passion is Hubbi Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the third passion is Hubbi Deen. Now, once you have these three fires burning in your heart, it is very easy to be generous, and it's very easy to be courageous. Generosity is sharing what you have. courage is standing for what you think is right. Now, with generosity and courage, it's very easy to be positive and energetic, and to be motivated and self-confident. And then your fasahat and balaghat in communication, it becomes better. You stop thinking in terms of I, you start thinking in terms of team building, teamwork, and you become a team player. So it is my family, my community, my masjid, my nation, my ummah. As soon as you become a team player, you have to start developing a belief system, and you start trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you and help others in walking the right path. And when you are walking the right path, you really understand that the only way to walk that path is with solid values taught by Rasulullah and mentioned in the Quran. The last thing about a beautiful mind is that it continuously learns and improves. So what is all this? Is this hardware and software? The obvious answer is it's software. This is the software of Islam. This is the software of Deen. In the time of Rasulullah, this was the software which was taught. On top of this software, people went into different professions, like they were shepherds, farmers, or traders. But regardless of the profession, they were gardeners of Islam in their particular profession. So how does this work today? If this software is there and you become a doctor, engineer, a PhD, a teacher, it doesn't matter what profession you are in, you will be a gardener of Islam. But if this software is not there, and you acquire all sorts of academic background, then you will be a woodcutter and parasite. So the key is that this software is what makes us a gardener, and the absence of this software makes us a woodcutter or parasite. So once we understand this, the next question is, what does this software do for us? Basically, it helps us in making this quantum leap from mediocrity to excellence. The curve of mediocrity is where most of us live. On this curve, the environment defines how we live. So for example, in the Ummah, you will find that more than 60% people are living below the poverty level. So for these people, whenever the price of dollar goes up, when the price of oil goes up, when inflation goes up, when there's downsizing, right-sizing, these people are crushed in poverty. They are defined by the environment they live in. People on the curve of excellence, they define the environment to live their lives according to how they want to live. So before the first day of Dawah, the Quraysh were living on the curve of mediocrity. As soon as any of Rasulullah's companions accepted Islam, they made a quantum leap from mediocrity to excellence. Now the crucial thing to understand is that in this transformation, two of the richest Sahaba who made this transformation were Hazrat Usman bin Affan and Hazrat Abdurrahman bin Auf. So that's very easy. They were rich, so they could live their life as they wanted. But then the eye-opener comes when you start looking at the life of Hazrat Bilal. When a slave who had been liberated by Hazrat Abu Bakr, when he makes the Shahada, he also makes this quantum leap. Hazrat Zaid bin Haris, who was a slave, he makes the quantum leap. Hazrat Samia, who dies because she accepted Islam, she also makes this quantum leap. So the question was, what did Rasulullah teach his companions that they could make this quantum leap from mediocrity to excellence? His message and the message of Islam consisted of 4 elements. The first one was to understand the vision of Islam. The vision of Islam actually is built upon 3 principles. The first principle is the oneness and supremacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Rasulullah is his prophet. The second principle is that there's a day of judgment. And the third one is that whatever we do in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the basis of our acts and deeds, will decide whether we'll go to Jannah or Dozakh, hell. Now the second thing which Rasulullah taught was to focus on building beautiful minds, whether it was the 13 years in Makkah or the 10 years in Medina. His total, absolute focus in the 23 years of Dawah was in helping his companions build a beautiful mind. The third thing which you see is that he taught them empowered learning. What it meant was that you build your beautiful minds by learning the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet. And the fourth element, which is the most powerful element in Islam, is that Islam is not about theory. Theory is only there to find the right path. But the real thing is that when you start walking the right path, Are you consciously, consistently trying to continuously improve the way you live as a Muslim? This is so powerful that Rasulullah Sallam, in one of his, in one of the hadiths, he said that any one of us whose today is not better than his yesterday is not one of us. This is the power of continuous improvement, and this is how he taught us to live our lives. The curve of mediocrity is the biggest graveyard of talented and God-gifted people who have no vision. Once the vision is not there, how do people judge who is better or worse? They focus on empire building, wealth collection, assets. And once you have a critical mass of empire and wealth, then you start thinking that you are wiser than everything else around you, and there's a disinterest in learning the Quran and Sunnah. And once that happens, then there is continuous deterioration. This deterioration starts from the qalb, it goes to the mind, and then the tongue, and then everything else is lost. So this curve of excellence is very powerful in Islam. And once you start walking this path, you come to the second major issue, that what happens to people who walk on the curve of excellence? Actually, there's a tremendous transformation of potential into achievements. We all have potential to succeed. The problem in the Ummah is not that we don't have potential. The problem is that we haven't learned to transform it into achievements. This ratio is one of the lowest in the globe. So we really wanted to understand why is it so. And the answer is very simple. If you look at America, Canada, Europe, Japan, China, India, Brazil, they are spending trillions of dollars on their people to convert their potential into achievements. But when you look at the Ummah, there are no investments that are made to make this happen. So because we didn't have the resources, we asked ourselves, okay, how did Rasulullah Sallam do this 1400 years ago? And the answer was very simple. He actually did something unique in the history of mankind. He taught his companions how to do this. The first element that he taught his people was to acquire knowledge from cradle to grave, and he asked every man, woman, and child to acquire this knowledge from cradle to grave. What we wanted was why it was so important for him that he kept on insisting acquire knowledge. And the answer was very simple. We all have problems, and if you look at our problems, one of the reasons the problem is there is that the level of problem is here and the level of our knowledge is here. As long as this parity is maintained, we will actually walk into our graves with not one but thousands of problems. So what is the easiest way to solve problems is to increase your knowledge in such a way that over a period of time, when the level of your knowledge rises above the level of your problem, the problem just dissipates, it dissolves. And towards this end, Quran teaches us this very simple dua for increasing the level of knowledge, and that is Rabbi Zidni Ilma. Unfortunately, we have been taught to recite this dua before our exams, after exams, but as soon as exams are over, we wrap it up. And then after graduation, we wrap it up so securely that we only open it when our children are going to school. The key is that in the world we live today, it is driven by knowledge, and we have tremendous problems. And we have to learn to make sure we recite this dua so every day our knowledge is increasing and we can solve problems. The second thing he taught his people was the attitude. Throughout his life, he faced problems, and he also, there were significant achievements in his life. So in the first 13 years when Islam was a minority in Mecca, persecuted, he taught his companions that the attitude for himself and his companions should be sabr, shukr, salah, and dua. In Medina, Islam started flowering, and there, what perhaps the greatest day in his life was the conquest of Makkah. And when he walks in there, rather than walking in arrogantly, history records that he was riding his camel bent double. His beard was touching the kajava of his camel with humility. And on his tongue, he was uttering words of hamd sana, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and shukr that Allah made this day possible. So the message for most of us is that all of us will have good days and bad days. And the key learning from his life is that on bad days, rather than lashing out at our families, spouses, children, and people who are weak, we should do sabr, shukr, salah, and dua. And we all have good days, and on those days, rather than walking arrogantly and telling people how good we are, the message from Mr. life is that with humility, we should do hamd sana and shukr that he gave us this opportunity to do well in life. Skills. He would always ask his companions that whatever you do, do it well. Ahsan was the word used. Habits. He had good habits, and he taught his companions to develop good habits. These were the 4 basic elements of transformation, but because he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wanted to focus this transformation towards the deen. So the first thing he reminded them was the vision. And not only the vision, but the purpose to be a good Muslim. And the purpose, as I understand, to be a good Muslim is very simple. Regardless of what you do, we have to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once you understand this concept, then you say, okay, how do I please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when you read the Quran says that you can please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by making sure you fulfill something Quran calls haququllah, which is your 5 salahs, your siyam and qiyam, your zakat and hajj if it applies to you. But then Quran says that's not enough. You have to take care of his people. That's what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And towards this, it's the parents, especially the mother. Your spouse, your children, your neighbors, Jatama wal masakin. And for Jatama, Rasulullah sallam has such a soft corner that he said, if you take care of one orphan, you will be like this with me in Jannah. He said the same thing about raising 2 daughters in Islam. And then anybody who's needy in the ummah, outside the ummah, any animal, if it's hungry, thirsty, you feed that animal, and that is haququl ibad. And in order to fulfill this tall goals, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us passion, hubbullah, hubbi rasul, and hubbi deen. Now, a beautiful mind has 2 additional keys. The first one is self-belief. A beautiful mind, the self-belief comes from 3 things which Rasulullah taught his companions. The first one was iman. You do the kalma, you have iman. The second one was yaqeen. Now yaqeen is if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowing him, without seeing him. You believe in his angels without seeing them. You believe in the day of the judgment without having seen it. You believe in the books and the holy prophets. But the last and the most beautiful thing is taqwa. And taqwa is so beautiful that I think if we are able to understand it, we will never ever live our life without it. My understanding of taqwa comes from this beautiful ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they ask you where I am, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, that tell them I'm closer to them than their jugular vein. Now this is so powerful that it is very powerful surah, ayah. But the key is that it took me a long time to understand this, the meaning. And one day, this is how it happened. I was hugging somebody I'm very close to, and I said, you know, I'm so close to my children, my son, and that I can actually, he's the closest person in my life. And that time I also understood that even though this person is the closest person in my life, I do not know what is in his heart and his mind. And at the same time, he doesn't know what is in my heart and mind. And then I immediately started connecting the dots. And this is how I learned it. If the biggest thing in my life is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and things that I can hide from my closest people, I cannot hide from him, then taqwa is to live my life so that every act pleases him. So what this means for me is that when I go to the masjid to do my salah, there are many reasons to go and do my salah, but if the greatest reason is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's taqwa. There are many reasons to go back to your spouse and your house, but if the greatest reason is to go back to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's taqwa. There are many reasons to make a living, but if the greatest reason is to make a living that's halal and tayyib, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's taqwa. So for whatever you do, if you try to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's taqwa. Now, this is the taqwa of ease, of comfort. What about taqwa under duress, when everything is falling apart? So towards this end, we said, let's read the Quran. And there are two instances where this becomes very powerful, taqwa under duress. The first one is Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, when he's taking his people away from the people of Pharaoh, and they are confronted by a water body which stops them. When they look back, they see the armies of Pharaoh, and the chiefs of Hazrat Musa's people, they said, Musa, you have destroyed us. And then with Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, with total absolute taqwa, stated these few words which are enshrined in the Quran, Inna ma'ayya rabbi sayahdeen. Roughly it means, my Rabb is with me, he'll show me a way. In the life of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he's migrating from Makkah to Medina, they're hiding in this cave, and the Quraysh with their horses ride up right to the face of the cave. And inside the cave, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq asks Hazrat Rasulullah sallam that, Ya Rasulullah, what will happen now? And the response of Rasulullah sallam was total, absolute taqwa under duress. He says, La tahzan, don't grieve, inna allaha ma'ana, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. So what this taqwa does is, it connects us directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a way that He becomes our protector, not only in this world, but in the hereafter. And ultimately, because of that connection, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us an instrument in which we serve Him by helping others. This taqwa is so beautiful that if you experience it, then for the rest of your life you'll forget everything and focus on this. The humility in Islam comes from learning that whatever you know is a drop in the bucket, and the more you learn, the more you discover how much you don't know. So the key was, once we understood this, that this is how Prophet ﷺ taught his people to convert potential into achievement, where do we start? And actually, after a lot of ponderance and debates, we found that we should start where Islam started. One of the things which we never understood was why did the message of Islam not start with Allahumma or Ya Rasulullah sallam, addressing Rasulullah sallam directly? Why did it start with Iqra bi ismi rabbik? Our understanding is that reading and learning is extremely powerful in Islam. Without reading and learning, you cannot understand the power of Iman, Yaqeen and Taqwa. Without reading and learning, you cannot understand the vision and purpose of Islam. Without reading and learning, you cannot understand the significance of the goals which are means towards the end. Without reading and learning, you cannot understand the passion of Hubbullah, Hubbi Rasul and Hubbi Deen. Without reading and learning, you cannot increase your knowledge. Without reading and learning, you cannot improve your attitude, skills, and habits. So this learning is so powerful that whenever a Sahabi accepted Islam, the first question when Rasulullah asked was, can you read and write? And if they did, he would say, okay, read the Quran. If you don't, then learn to read and write. Now when you read the Quran, he would say, acquire knowledge from the Quran and the Sunnah. And then the third step was to apply it to your real life. So much so that when the Qari was reading the Qari and the Quran would be on the same wavelength. When the Quran says, do the Salah, the Qari would say, Wallah, I do it. When the Quran said, be truthful, the Qari would say, I am Sadiq. And when the Qari said, be honest, and in your dealings, the Qari would say, but I am Ameen. So at every step, Qari and Quran were on this. This was application of knowledge to your real life. And the last step was that with the best teacher under the sun, and the best students, it took 23 years. For all of us, it's a lifetime process. Bismillah. So where do we go from once we learn how to transform potential into achievement? Actually, there's a quantum jump. We learn to transform our destinies. So if you look at the brain and mind, it doesn't evolve in a vacuum. It needs an environment to develop. In Islam, the environment is actually consists of 5 major elements. The first one is the religion itself. the first day when a baby is 1 day old, totally helpless. In my country back home, they give adhan in the right ear and akama in the left. And on the last day when your mayyat is there, you're so helpless you can't flick a fly from your face. They actually give you a bath. They shroud you in 2 pieces of cloth and bury you the way Prophet ﷺ taught us. In between, the religious says this is the Siratul Mustaqim. And if you walk this path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with you in this world and hereafter. But if you deviate, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will destroy you not only in this world but in the hereafter. And actually what you are seeing in the Ummah is deviation from the path of Siratul Mustaqim. Family is the biggest building block in Islam, the most beautiful building block. And in this building block, the most powerful person is the mother. And if you really want to understand her power, think about the ayahs in the Quran which talk about the mother of Bibi Maryam when Bibi Maryam is in her womb. And she makes this dua, this so powerful dua, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please accept this child in your service. And in response, she has Bibi Maryam who has Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. Now, why is this important? If you look at our mothers today, and when their children are in their womb, what sort of du'as do they make? I remember my wife making dua that my sons should be healthy, they should be wealthy, they should have nice spouses, nice houses, all du'as of the dunya. But we never prayed that they should be accepted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's service. Friends. Friends are people whom we choose in our lives. And actually what I have seen is that if you have friends of the dunya, they will ask you how to succeed in the dunya. And most of them, they do not know anything about the deen. But if you have friends of the deen, then they will always, always help you in being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and help you in walking the path, Sirat al-Mustaqim. And they will also teach you the meaning of Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I pray to you and I seek your help. So these friends are very powerful, not only in this world, but in the hereafter. Culture, Rasulullah ﷺ inherited a mixed bag of culture, but he actually taught us that when you have a mixed bag of culture, how to deal with it. He looked at the principles of Islam, and he looked at his culture. Whatever was consistent with Islam, he said, this is ours. For example, generosity, courage, hospitality, taking care of your parents. But whatever was inconsistent with Islam, he threw it away, like killing your daughters or killing your children because for fear of poverty, marrying your father's multiple wives. And he said, this is not us. So for most of us, we have a mixed bag of culture which we have back home. And again, the principle is the same. You look at the principles of Islam, whatever is consistent, that's ours. What is inconsistent, throw it out. For those of us who have chosen to live in America, this culture also comes with a mixed bag. So you pick up what is consistent with the principles of Islam and say, this is ours, and what is inconsistent, you just throw it out. Organization. Most of us are economic migrants in the United States, and we came here to seek affluence. And it's natural that we should want to work for the highest bidder of our talents. But here, if you really want to live your life according to the deen, then the deen says that the seeking of rizq, working, is a subset of the deen. Deen is not subset of your job. So here, what I suggest, and my understanding of the deen is, go to the highest bidder of your skills. But always make sure that this bidder will allow you the freedom to practice your deen and the freedom to take care of your family. And once this is there, then choose the organization wisely. Now these 5 elements, they give input to the brain and mind. The output of the brain and mind consists of 3 elements. The first and the most powerful are the feelings we had when we were 1-day-old children. That is what a child is born with, feeling of hot, cold, hungry. Over a period of time, you learn to discern between the picture of your father, how it's different from the picture of your mother, and then you start having ideas and thoughts. How can I make things happen? Like if I smile, somebody would pick me up. You understand that the father brings the chocolates and the cokes when he comes back from work to appease you. This triangle stays with us throughout our lives. And actually, according to this triangle, every single that word we utter is consistent with this triangle. So for the first 50 years of my life, when I was a woodcutter and a first-class woodcutter, most of my words were about how to become a good parasite. And the actions are consistent with the words that were consistent with that of a first-class parasite. And then my habits were those of Qarun, Haman, and Firaun, and my character was very close to Qarun, Haman, and Firaun. And actually, my destiny was assured a first-class ticket to hell. This was the output I was giving out to the world. And then one day, I started reading the Quran, trying to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted from me in this world. And what I found was that everything that he wanted from me was totally inconsistent with the way I was living my life. And in that feeling of helplessness, I started praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can you show me Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim? And over a period of time, as my discontent grew and my du'as, they increased, I found that the first thing that changed was my feelings. Rather than hoarding things, I wanted to share, I wanted to care, I wanted to give away. And over a period of time, my dreams changed from trying to become wealthy, significant, and powerful. The dreams were, can we reshape the thinking within the ummah? And now 24/7, the ideas and thoughts are those of a gardener. How can we make it happen? Now, once this triangle changed, what I found was that the words that I used to utter, they changed. I still teach, but now the words are that of a gardener. The actions are closer to that of a gardener. The habits are those of a gardener. I'm hoping and praying that over a period of time, before I die, this character will change from Qarun, Haman, and Firaun to the people who became gardeners of Islam. And then I'm hoping and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his infinite mercy, will forgive me in this world and hereafter. So this is the output we give. And the world around us, it weighs the output with invisible hands and gives us feedback. One of the most powerful feedback that we get is that, Nasser, you're a first-class idiot and stupid fool. You are trying to become a gardener in a world that is dominated by woodcutters and parasites. They will not only destroy you, but they'll destroy each and every person who will listen to you and try and become a gardener. Now, this is scary. So I started thinking about Prophet ﷺ, who from the first day of his dawah till his last breath, he faced insurmountable odds. What did he practice? That from the first day of his dawah till his last breath, he never even once wavered. And I found that throughout his life, if you go through it, he drew his force, his power from his belief system. And then he used his values to share the message with his companions. So in terms of belief system, the Quraysh believed in numbers, in wealth, in weaponry, and they thought this will be enough to destroy the Muslims and Rasulullah Sallam. While Rasulullah Sallam didn't have access to all those material things, but he had something very powerful. He had Iman, Yaqeen, and Taqwa. So with this Iman and Yaqeen and Taqwa, he said, I will not give in to the reverse values mentioned in the Quran, which take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will practice the forward values, which take you closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if you look at the Ummah, most of us, we know the difference between reverse values and forward values. So what's the key? The key is that there is something called forward stated values. These are the values we talk about ourselves when we introduce ourselves to others. We say, oh, you know, come and work with me. I am honest, I have integrity, I'm good, and I have all the virtues mentioned in the Quran. The problem is we find reality once we develop a relationship with these people, whether it's in marriage, in friendship, or business, and we find that for most of us, the stated values are very different from the lived values. And here is the key. If you read the Quran, for people who live their lives differently from what they state about their lives, these people are called hypocrites or munafiqeen. And for them, Quran says it's the lowest levels of hell is the punishment. And I actually wondered why their punishment is greater than the punishment of kuffar. So one of the things I understood is when somebody walks up to you and says, I'm a kafir and I want to do business with you, then you are on your guard. But if somebody says, I am a beautiful Muslim and you do business with me and then you are deceived by them, that is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like. So the punishment is very high. And then the next question asked was that how did Rasulullah respond to munafiqat? He actually faced it in Medina. In Makkah, they were either the kuffar or the Muslim. But this category of deceivers actually he faced in Medina. And the way he taught us was so powerful. He said, I cannot control the munafiqeen, but I can control that I should never be a munafiq. And how did he do it? He actually showed us by example. There were 5 elements of his fight against munafiqat. The first 2 were that he was Sadiq and Ameen. The importance of being Sadiq and Ameen is that if you are Sadiq and Ameen, you cannot be a munafiq. And if you are a munafiq, you cannot be a Sadiq and Ameen. So they are mutually exclusive. So it's not possible for me to be Sadiq and Ameen with my spouse and munafiq at work or vice versa. This is where you start. You start becoming a Sadiq. And I think the hardest thing in this world of parasites and woodcutters is to start living your life as a Sadiq and an Ameen. The third element which he showed us was that whenever he made a transaction, he would always give back more than what he got. And if you really want to understand this, look at the life of Zayd bin Haris, who was a child slave. And when his parents sold everything they had to buy him back from Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ listened to them very patiently and then said, well, ask him if he wants to go, he can go, I don't really need anything from you. And when they went back to Zayd bin Haris, he refused. And this question I asked myself again and again, why did he do that? Actually, if you look at the situation of slaves in Makkah, the masters were supposed to just give food, shelter, and clothing to the slaves. But Rasulullah ﷺ gave so much more in terms of kindness, generosity, love, caring, sharing, that Zayd bin Haris didn't want to go to his real parents. So, if you want to fight munafiqat, you start with Sadiq and Ameen, and then you add on giving back more than what you get, whether in your home, in your job, in your masjid, in your society or community. The fourth element is something very strange. If you read his life started with total absolute poverty in the sense that when he was born, there was nothing in the house of Bibi Amna. Everything that Hazrat Abdullah had left had melted. He left some goats, sheep, horses, and camels. And from the day he died to the day Prophet ﷺ was born, everything had disappeared. So there was nothing to celebrate his birth. This was the first chapter of his life. The last chapter of his life, the last 10 days when he was very unwell, and there's a tradition that says that Bibi Aisha, he asked Bibi Aisha if there's anything in the house, and she said there are a few coins, and he said, please give them away. I do not want to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with anything in my house. And there's a tradition that says that on the last night when he had tremendous pain and fever, there was no oil in the lamp in the house of Prophet ﷺ. So this is the key. When you come to the richest country in the world, which is United States of America, you are stunned with people who are homeless. And when you ask yourself that who are these people, people will tell you they have no houses, they have no cars, they have no credit cards, they have no cash, and they're homeless. So actually their own families have spewed them out in the streets, their friends have given up, the whole society has given up on them. In terms of Rasulullah ﷺ, he had nothing when he was born, he has nothing when he died, and in between whatever he had, he gave it away. So the idea was, why didn't his people spurn him and let him out? And instead of spurning him, they loved him so much that at the time of Sulh Hudaybiyah, one of the chiefs of Quraysh came to request Rasulullah to go back. And he went back to the chiefs of Quraysh and he said, don't mess around with this guy, this person, Rasulullah ﷺ. And they said, why? He said, I've been to the courts of Qaisar and Kasra and I've found them very well respected. But even in their courts, their courtiers didn't respect them as much as the companions of Rasulullah respect Rasulullah ﷺ. And the Quraysh chief said, give us an example. And he said, well, when he does his wudu, his companions do not let the water of the wudu fall to the ground. They hold it in their hands and they rub it on their faces and chest. So the question was, why did they love him so much when he had nothing of material value to give? And the answer is very simple. One of my teachers explained it to me, that if you read his seerah, any seerah, you will never find him criticizing any of his companions by name. And instead, what he would look for would be good in others. For example, there was a man called Abu Bakr, and he said, you know, you are my Siddiq, because he saw that quality of friendship inside him. And 1400 years have passed. Unless you combine Abu Bakr with Siddiq, you do not know who we are talking about. And there was this man called Umar, you know, who kept his sword half drawn. First, Nauzubillah, to kill Prophet ﷺ, and then once he accepted Islam, he kept that sword half drawn to fight the enemies of Islam. And in that fire, Rasulullah ﷺ saw that he had the ability to see and distinguish between right and wrong. So he called him Farooq. There was a man called Usman, the Warren Buffett of his time. He could change dust into gold. And he looked inside and he said, you are Ghani, generous one. And there was an unassuming boy called Ali, and he called him Abu Turab and Asadullah. How many of us look for qualities in people who serve us? Bilal used to serve Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Bilal, what do you do? I heard your footsteps in Jannah. How many of us look for good qualities in our enemies? Khalid bin Walid was the only person to defeat Rasulullah ﷺ in Uhud, and he said, you are Saifullah. So this is the key. He would look for good qualities in his companions, and these companions, when they understood what Rasulullah ﷺ saw in them, they developed these qualities, and then they did something unique. They joined their qualities with each other like this, and this made the invincible community of Medina, which we all think about, dream, and try and replicate in our lives. Why is it important for us? For most of the people in the Ummah, after the first 3 years, somebody whispers in the mother's ear that you are spoiling this child. So the mother starts telling the child, you don't do this, you don't do this, and you know, the criticism starts. And then the child is sent to school where the teacher is responsible for telling the child how bad he or she is at the schoolwork. And then they go to work, and where the boss is paid to tell you what you haven't done right. And then you get married, and the spouse comes after the honeymoon and tells each other, they start telling each other what they're doing wrong in life. And when the children come, they see this beautiful exchange of words about criticism, and that is what they learn. They learn to criticize their parents. So when I was, and what we see is that people like myself who are in their 50s, all they know about themselves is what they cannot do and what's wrong with them. So we are like this machine. If all I know about this laptop is what it cannot do and what's wrong with it, I will never be able to use it. So once I understood this, I asked myself, Nasser, okay, what is the quality inside you? And after many months of searching, I found that I could teach with ikhlas. And so I started slowly, gradually developing that. Over that time, this beautiful mind concept had started evolving and developing. In 2011, I came to America, and my children were here studying at Northwestern. So I said, okay, let's see if we can use this concept with the Muslims in America. And I started making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, can you help me in doing it? And lo and behold, ICNA invited me to their convention in Georgia, Atlanta. And there, when we made this presentation, I still remember that Brother Yusuf from Florida, he walks up to me and says, can you do this for our people in Florida? And I looked at him and I said, Wallah, that's what I want to do. And then for 16 days, we visited 16 masajid in 16 cities. And we, with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I started learning how to do it in the American environment. Next winter, we were in California. We did this program in 22 masajid in 22 days. And then we've covered the East Coast, till such time that we have done more than 100 programs. But this is the key. The key is, all by myself, with the best intentions of doing this work, I could have covered maybe one masjid, which is Sinai Mosque in Houston, and one or two masajid in maybe Evanston, where I live with my son, because that's the net level of resources I had. But when I, with my niya of khair and with my resources and with my ikhlas and this program, joined hands with ICNA. Now, ICNA is actually one of the gardeners of Islam in America, and they are working with people who are helpless, like women who don't have a place to live. They provide shelter. People who are hungry, they have food pantries for them. People who are unable to live peacefully in their families, they're providing family services. So every time they find a problem in the Ummah in America, they will try and come up with a solution. And they have tremendous access to the masajid. So once we joined hands, my teaching and ICNA's ability to reach the people, with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we were able to reach more than 100 masajid in 11 states. All by myself, I could have done nothing, and ICNA all by itself would maybe have done something better, but not what we can do together. So the key is the 4 points that fight munafiqat, which help us live together in trust. Sadiq and Ameen, doing more than what you get, giving back more than what you get, looking for good in others. And the last one is doing it in such a good way that it is a pleasure to be with you. And how do you start? Basically, you start with the intention of khair. You start making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I want to do khair in this world, can you help me? And one of the duas which I learned from Brother Yusuf Estes in Austin was very powerful in helping me in changing the way I live. And this dua is very simple. There are two things Muslims are scared of. One is risk, and the other is companionship. So for risk, Brother Yusuf Estes said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give me only that risk, which is halal and tayyib, and which has khair barakah in it. And for companionship, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me in meeting only those people whom you are pleased with. And the last part of the dua is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me in becoming one of those whom you are pleased with. So this is the key, that when you want to become somebody whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, then you automatically revert to the iman, yaqeen and taqwa in your belief system. You automatically start living your life according to forward-lived values, and the 4 and 5 values Rasulullah taught us to build strong communities. You practice them. Now, once the iman is there, yaqeen and taqwa is there, and the beautiful 5 values of Rasulullah are there, then your feelings become so powerful. Your dreams become so powerful. Your ideas and thoughts become so powerful. Your words become those of a gardener. Your actions, habits, character, and destiny changes. Everything changes. And this beautiful ayah actually describes the change, and that man can have nothing but what he strives for, good and bad. Actually, if you look at it, if you work as a gardener, that is what you will get in the end and in this life. But if you live your life as a woodcutter parasite, that is what we'll get in this world and hereafter. This ayah is about the ummah. Allah will not change what is in any nation until they all collectively make a change occur in what is in themselves. The key here is that the only person in the ummah whom I can control is myself. I cannot control my wife. I tried doing that, and I promise you it doesn't work. You can't control your mother-in-law. You will die if you try and do that. You can't control even your own children. People you pay salaries. There's only one person you can control. That's yourself. And once you start controlling and making dua for the right belief system and the right values, everything starts changing for you. And if you change, there's a possibility that your spouse will change, your house will change, your family will change, your neighbors will change, the community, the masjid, the nation, and the ummah will change. I strongly believe that on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us many questions about what we did with the resources we had. But one of the questions that He will ask, and the answer that will change your life is, that when the ummah was on fire, what were you working as? A woodcutter or parasite starting new fires, or a gardener who was putting out fires and making it easy for the ummah? And the answer to this question will actually determine our destiny. So before you go to sleep, my request is, make that answer thoughtful with tadabbur and tafakkur. Make sure you have thought through the consequences, not only for you in this world, but in the hereafter. Jazakallah khair. This is the end, but actually it can be a new beginning, because today we all have a choice. We can either keep on living like woodcutters or parasites, or choose to live the life of a gardener and make a new beginning for ourselves, our families, our communities, our masajids, our nation, and the ummah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.